are no policy differences between the EFF and the ANC. So talk to us about if there were to be a coalition between these two parties, what would it look like?
Well, it will be a coalition that is based on expropriation of land without compensation, nationalization of mines and banks, the creation of jobs, and the stopping of load shedding. So we are strong believers that the government must be at the center of development in South Africa if we're to succeed.
But it's very unlikely that the ANC would meet some of those demands. So what exactly is a deal breaker here? And what are you willing to maybe negotiate on?
Well, the ANC had agreed with us in 2021 when we were talking coalitions of local government. And the spoilers came through and disrupted that agreement. But you will know that in 2017, the ANC went to take resolutions on these matters. The ANC has got a resolution on expropriation of land, on nationalization of the Reserve Bank, and all manner of things. So that's why I say from a policy perspective, it shouldn't be difficult for the EFF and the ANC and MK and ATM and PAC and UDM to find each other so that we can make progress on behalf of our
So then what's the likelihood then, based on your current polling, what should we be expecting come May 29th in terms of coalition parties?
Well, you must expect coalitions. I wouldn't say which parties because there hasn't been a talk to that extent. There is a very clear, uncontested, thing that no one is going to pass 50%.
You don't think the ANC will?
No, they will not. Even they themselves don't believe they will pass 50%. So they should be preparing themselves to co-govern with other political parties. Otherwise, they're going to find themselves in the cold.
Do things get done, though, in a coalition government here in South Africa? Because I've heard from different politicians that nothing will get done just because of the gulf between some of these parties in terms of their policies.
The coalition policies work everywhere, including here in South Africa. They will work. The problem is that the ANC is used to so much power, so much that when it is in a coalition, it gets frustrated because it does as it wishes. But under coalition, they will not be able to do so. They have to swallow their pride and put aside their ego.
But what does that actually look like? What does that look like, but practically, right? Yeah. Because, you say swallow your pride, but what does that mean for a party that's been in power now for so long?
It means you no longer have power. That's the first thing you need to admit.
Does that mean, but people move then? People move out of certain roles? President Cyril Ramaphosa potentially?
Ramaphosa can be removed from his role. Other ministers of the ANC, obviously, they will no longer occupy all cabinet because they no longer have the absolute majority. They are going to have to give way for those people who are accommodating them to be part of the governing.
Are there certain cabinet positions that the EFF would want as a deal breaker if you were to get into?
If we go into a coalition, obviously we want to be in the presidency, and if that is no, we want the finance department because we're not going to participate in a coalition where we are meaningless, who can't make any contribution to immediately change the lives of our people.
And why Floyd Shivambu? Because you said he should be the finance minister if this were to happen.
Floyd Shivambu is the best economist this country has produced. He knows and understands the South African economy. He knows that South Africa has got 3 trillion debt, which is servicing, and out of that 3 trillion debt, 28 billion is an apartheid debt. So you minus 28 billion from the 3 trillion, you save a lot of money because we must argue internationally that we cannot pay for a debt that was meant to kill us. So, and he will prioritize our people. It will not be just emphatic on austerity measures and a fiscal policy that is only interested in the markets and neglect the fundamental demands of our people where we need to meet the most basic needs of the downtrodden.
Are you suggesting the fiscal policies right now are catering then to the market and not to the country?
If they were catering the country, South Africa will not be the most unequal society in the world. The number one unequal society in the world It can be that our fiscal policy prioritizes the poor when poverty levels in South Africa have increased and joblessness in South Africa has increased. In one province of Eastern Cape, half of the population is unemployed. So everything we're told when we say, please channel the resources this way, let's do this. No, the market are not going to accept what you are trying to do.
But there's some concern among investors when they hear about, especially nationalization of something like the central bank, how that actually gets the country into growth and into development and achieving some of these goals that you're talking about. I mean, how do you see this actually benefiting the country?
Well, it guarantees our sovereignty. These investors you are talking about, you will find them in many other countries. South Africa is one of the few countries in the world whose reserve bank is privately owned. Mm-hmm. So these investors that are going to be worried about us safeguarding our sovereignty have themselves invested in other countries where the reserve banks are owned by the state. So it will be inconsistency and an unacceptable thing to say, no, South Africa must not do it, and whereas you allow other people to do it and you still invest in those countries.
How would it work then if you were to actually nationalize the Reserve Bank?
It will be, the governor will be appointed by the state, and the members of the Reserve Bank board are going to be appointed by the state, and it will ensure that its sovereignty, it is based on the interest of the South African people.
What are those interests, though? And let's just talk about the private shareholders who, at this point, as you mentioned, are currently, holding shares in the Reserve Bank. I mean, what would happen with these entities then?
No, the private shareholders must be gradually bought out of the Reserve Bank, and we cannot allow a situation where we say no. At all cost, these private investors must stay because what about their investments? We are not an anarchist organization. We are a progressive organization that is going to gradually ensure that strategic sectors of the economy are state-owned. And it doesn't mean private sector can't play a role. It will play a role in other sectors of the economy, not on strategic sectors.
What if that then puts in jeopardy the rand and the strength of the economy here in foreign direct investment? I mean, would you then maybe take a step back from this position?
No, we can't do that. Of course, there's going to be a bit of a setback. There's going to be an attack on our policy, but the world is now evolving and changing into a different kind of world. There is a huge debate now to de-dollarize the economy of the African continent, and there are other markets outside the dollar that will be prepared to invest and boost our economy, and will use our mineral resources as well to boost our currency.
So what kind of setback then are you anticipating if you are to nationalize something like the Reserve Bank?
No, a setback is going to be that we're disinvesting in a way of trying to intimidate us. It will not be for the first time where the capitalists want to impose themselves on people through disinvestment. The only thing is, do you have alternative markets when they disinvest on this or that sector? Will these alternative markets come in? And then China is more than willing to come in. Russia is more than willing to come in. And we're able to close that gap. And we must equally start trading in a very big way with the African continent, because sometimes we don't invest from amongst ourselves. We over-rely on America and the West. Whereas if we're to do business amongst ourselves, we'll be better off. So it shouldn't be that when that threat comes, we should be shaken. We should know it's going to come, and we should anticipate that when they come, these are alternative markets that are lined up to come and intervene.
But couldn't it potentially put relationships like that of the EU, which is a major trading partner for South Africa, in jeopardy if the country aligns even closer to Russia or to China?
Well, it's our self-determination. We cannot be told by EU who our friends should be and who our trading partners should be. If anything, the colonizers and the imperialist forces are not our ally, and we make no secret about that.
I mean, they're the biggest trading partner for
because the other markets are closed out. The biggest trading partners who can help us build power stations. If anything, they say destroy your power stations. And because we are their trade partners, we are unable to go beyond them and ask other people who can come help us to make our country a better place.
So what would then be, you've talked about everyone is a friend if they are working in the national interests of South Africa, correct?
Yeah.
What are those national interests? What would be priorities?
We need to safeguard the sovereignty of the South African state and make sure that its interests are first more than any other country. So, for instance, if you are to engage in a trade partnership, you always have to ensure that that trade agreement is beneficial and it is in the best interest of South Africa, not because the EU or Britain or America feels you need to go this direction or else we will withdraw certain benefits that are there for South Africa. So that's what we're talking about, not people who are going to be saving the interest of our colonizer, the interest of the imperialists.
Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, is set to make a visit to South Africa. I mean, considering what you're saying about Russia, does your foreign policy stance potentially put that relationship in jeopardy? Would you meet with him? And I wonder what you would say then.
No, I can't meet with him.
Why?
I've got no business meeting with him because he's engaged in a struggle to get people killed out of nothing. He is saving the agenda of the NATO forces and wanting the NATO to engage in a illegal territorial expansion and undermine the sovereignty of the Russian people. And the Russian people are saying we've got a right to defend ourselves. So I will not meet with a person who serves the interest of other people other than the interest of his own people in his own country.
Julius, in the Ed board, you were saying that there's been a lot of fear-mongering that's going on. I mean, considering what you're saying and considering the jitters among investors, is it justified? I mean, considering, you could potentially destabilize a lot of the relationships that South Africa has had intact.
It's a foreign policy of the EFF government, and it should not be scaremongering because whoever now comes to relate with us will now know where we stand on this or that issue. It doesn't make Zelensky an enemy of the EFF. All we're saying is he has to make a clear pronunciation. He's not joining NATO because the joining of NATO allows NATO to undermine the sovereignty of the Russian people. And we know who NATO is. NATO, America, you can't separate them. So that's all we say. The same thing with Palestine and Israel. We're not anti-Jewish people. We are anti-apartheid Israel, which is committing genocide in Palestine. But if they stop what they are doing in Palestine and genuine talks take place where the two-state theory can be canvassed and be implemented, we're more than willing to participate in that kind of discourse to try and find a solution in the Middle East. So our support for Palestine does not necessarily suggest we are anti-Semitism.
And Julius, before I let you go, because I realize I've gone over, I wanted to ask you about your former boss, Jacob Zuma, former president of South Africa. His MK party is doing better than I think a lot of people expected. Are you anticipating the MK party to take some of the success away from the EFF, as some polls are suggesting they're doing with the ANC?
Well, at the center of the formation of the EFF, it was our battle with Jacob Zuma. So there is no person who would have said, no, I'm joining EFF, yet I support Jacob Zuma at that time. So our base has never been based on the basis of the love and support for Jacob Zuma. So why would something that was not based on his love and support be threatened by him? We are a national organization. We have had successful rallies in all provinces, And we are the only organization after the ANC that has got membership and presence in almost all municipalities in South Africa and exist in every corner of South Africa. We welcome President Zuma to the terrain. Let him come, but he knows himself by now that it's not easy to form a political party. It might be nice there to make noise and pull the numbers, but the actual work is still to begin, and we welcome him. In the ANC, it was not him who formed the ANC. He found the infrastructure there, and the infrastructure always knew how a leader should be supported.
So it doesn't present a threat to the EFF support?
Not at all. We were in KZN recently. After President Zuma announced MK Party in December, we went to KZN after December, had a successful rally in KZN where it is the base of MK, and that did not affect us. But from policy perspective, ourselves and President Zuma are not very far. And it's one of the parties that after the elections, it will be interesting to engage with.
Julius Malema, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you.